are going to time me tonight. But I wanted to thank the ad hoc committee who met last spring and 2 weeks ago for going through the detail. It's a lot of information that the committee has gone through, so we appreciate the time and effort of the ad hoc and all of you tonight coming to this meeting. I want to recognize a few folks on the evaluation committee that were involved in the process. Kathleen Gallagher, who's the interim IWM manager for the county, Louis Valdez, and as a quick aside, Louis is leaving us and going to Napa County, where he thinks he's going to have an easy job and drink wine all day, but we know different. So we're going to miss Louis. So he was a big part of our evaluation team. We also have members of the selection committee here. You may ask sort of what happens after this. You know, the presentation you're going to hear tonight is informational only. There will be a recommendation that will come forward for a contractor, sort of an official ranking and a recommendation. That will actually come for the selection committee, which is the executives of your three jurisdictions. So Bill Avera, Ray Espinoza, and I don't know if it's officially Michelle, but we have Ed here who participated in a couple of the selection committee meetings. So thank them for their efforts. Hello, good evening. I also wanted to thank the three proposers. As I explained before, going through this process myself when I worked in the private sector, it's an arduous, difficult task. There's obviously a big prize at the end of the road, but all of you put in, I know, probably thousands of hours into the effort, so we appreciate all the time you put into it. A special thank you to Recology. I think probably all of the proposers have been in a situation where you're the incumbent and you have to share information. It's never easy to do that, to share all your existing operational information, so we appreciate Phil's efforts on that. Lastly, I did want to raise and bring to the attention all the drivers here in their safety gear. You can see who they are. And just say that we know that there's a lot of uncertainty in this process. Anytime there's a potential for change, there's obviously a lot of stress. So again, both Kathleen and I know there's plenty of folks here in the audience that have worked in the industry. We appreciate what you do every day, and we will get through this process as quickly as we can. The chair went through the agenda. There's going to be one single presentation that'll cover the evaluation committee findings, and then we're going to talk about the schedule and next steps. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen Gallagher. She's going to go through the first part of the presentation.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I wanted to get to the core of what we are doing all of these recycling programs for. Our regional agency joins together our three jurisdictions, and what we do is we report to our state agency, CalRecycle, every year to note our progress toward meeting the AB 939 recycling mandate. You may remember AB 939 started in 1989, and it required all jurisdictions and all regional agencies to divert 50% of our waste away from landfill. And divert in terms of recycling, our recyclables like bottles and cans, or our organics. These are the types of things that are the programs that we need to implement to meet our 50% mandate.
Mr. Chair, quick question.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Quick question.
Sure.
What is there a deadline? Is it 2020, 2025 to meet that 50%?
Yeah, great question. So AB 939 required that all jurisdictions meet that mandate by the 2010 and maintain that diversion requirement.
2010?
Correct. So the law began in 1989, and jurisdictions had to meet that by 2010 and maintain that 50% diversion, basically indefinitely. So this is a mandate that has got just it's basically in perpetuity. There's until the law is changed.
Okay.
But that is what the mandate of AB 939 is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Thank you. So CalRecycle provides when we provide to the our jurisdiction data. We also have CalRecycle staff come from Sacramento and audit our program. So not only do they look at what our actual numbers are, how much are we disposing of our waste to the landfill, they also want to know what programs we are implementing. So what I wanted to emphasize is CalRecycle has been quite active in looking at our programs, and what CalRecycle has done as part of their requirements is that was what they've stated is if they have audited our programs and they feel as though the jurisdiction is not meeting its diversion requirement or it's not mandating its programs, they could place us or other jurisdictions on what's called a compliance schedule. That compliance schedule basically says you need to meet these specific requirements at a certain time, and if you don't, we could fine you. And so what CalRecycle, as part of AB 939, it does have the right to fine a jurisdiction up to $10,000 per day for non-compliance. Now you may ask, have they done it? Have they implemented any types of compliance schedules? Yes, they have, and they have also fined some jurisdictions. There's actually 8 jurisdictions on the CalRecycle website that have been fined. So I am I keep CalRecycle very informed in terms of what we're doing of our programs. We have really enhanced our construction and demolition recycling programs. We have enhanced recycling programs up at the landfill. We keep them really abreast. They're very familiar with our franchise agreement and the new programs that we are looking to implement, because one of the key things that they've stated to us in their communications is one of the key problems they've noted is our very low commercial recycling rate, which is right now at 6%. So right now in our 2017 data, we have disposed of about 11,000 tons to landfill, and we've recycled from our businesses, and we've only recycled 674 tons. So there's a big growth that we need to do in terms of increasing our commercial recycling. So what I wanted to do is just provide you with some perspective. What do we look like in comparison to in comparison to our neighbors? So as what you can see is for Hollister, San Juan, and San Benito, these are our commercial recycling rates. What I wanted to just point out is in some of our neighboring jurisdictions, you can see some are double, some are more than double, and some are triple our current diversion rates. And one thing to note that you'll notice in our new franchise agreement is we really have an emphasis on programs for new commercial recycling programs. One of the things for businesses like Heavenly Bakery or Hardeen's is one of the things that they really need is some on-site assistance to help them train their staff, to help them understand what can be recycled and reduce their garbage. So that's one of the things that of note, and you may ask this question, for example, SBWMA, that is a jurisdiction of 12 communities in San Mateo County. They have dedicated a lot of staff time to help businesses recycle. That's a big differentiator, and you'll see in our new franchise agreements that that's what we're also going to be encouraging. So you'll be happy to know I'm not going to go through all these laws, but these thank you, Chair De La Cruz, or excuse me, Supervisor De La Cruz. In terms of the laws, so AB 939 was really the beginning of the mandates, but mandates have also really become progressively more complex, and they're really focusing on businesses, and they're really focusing on having businesses recycle their organic material. So these are the types of requirements that we have basically brought our old franchise agreement up to standard, and that is including meeting all of these requirements of these mandatory requirements. So really quickly, I know, thank you to the Franchise Ad Hoc Committee. They have sat through this presentation before, and as Kevin has stated, I'm going to try and be brief on it. But some of the new programs for our residents will address those gaps in our current programs, and what that includes is our new yard waste recycling program for all of our residents, and they include in their food scraps right into that same container. You might say, why do we need to do that? And the reason is because 19 to 21% of the waste that we have going to landfill is food. So it's one of the big areas that is still getting landfilled and what we really want to focus on. For our residents, we're also going to have our on-call bulky item collection, basically where residents can call to the hauler and have the material like a mattress picked up right from their curbside up to 2 times a year. It's up to the resident to decide when. We're providing electronic waste recycling and confidential document shredding events. And then one of the big ones, it's one of the cheap ways to increase recycling, is really expanding our public education, providing a lot more information to our residents in terms of what's recyclable.
The e-waste, excuse me for interrupting, where does the e-waste recycling occur at?
Sure. So we right now have electronic waste recycling up at John Smith Landfill through ECS. So those, it is up to the hauler to decide which e-waste recycler that they want to use, but that's the one that we're currently using. And one thing I just wanted to note very quickly on the residential programs, you might know that our current programs for yard waste have our residents have to call in and say, I need a yard waste recycling bin, and they actually have to pay an extra charge, and they'll see it on their invoice. We're going to be doing away with that in the new franchise agreement, where basically all those services are provided to our residents, and those costs are covered by the garbage rates themselves. So they're not going to see these extra charges for a bulky item event or for a yard waste program, and it really helps people participate in these programs. Then really quickly, we're going to have free compost giveaway events for our residents, and then we're also going to continue those quarterly bulky item events up at John Smith. For our businesses, basically what we are including is expanding that recycling service for our businesses. We really want to make sure every single business gets on-site recycling service. And we're requiring that we have a recycling, basically 2 staff at a minimum in our new services. Again, for our businesses, we want to have education and flyers, and we have a very dedicated list in our franchise agreement. And again, 100% of our staff, 100% of the recycling staff at a minimum of 2 will be providing that outreach to our businesses. I am going to hand this back over to Kevin, and I'm happy to answer any questions through the presentation.
Any questions at this point?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
Can you go back to the bulky items, pick up 2 times a year? Is that in the new contract, or is that current?
That is in the new contract.
So whoever that provider is has to provide that service to the door?
To the curbside, yes, curbside. And what we didn't want to do is take away from folks that are used to going up to the quarterly events up at John Smith, so we will continue to maintain those. But what we find is people tend to hang on to a lot of garbage, and so what this is offering, the bulky item, right to the residents' curbside twice a year of their choosing. The date is of their choosing. Thanks so much, and happy to answer any other questions.
I'll jump past this slide. So this is just showing who the evaluation committee was. So how did we go about scoring these proposals? So back last spring, we made a presentation to the ad hoc committee. We provided draft RFP documents, and this table was in there. And there was many pages that describe what these criteria mean. And so we went through that process with the ad hoc. Ultimately, the Board of Supervisors and the cities of Hollister and San Juan Bautista approved this. And so you may get some questions tonight from folks about how did we do this. So the evaluation committee had a very prescribed set of criteria. Behind each one of these, there's sub-criteria. It's all laid out in the RFP. So these documents were out there for probably a year, so everybody's really familiar with the process. This is also a pretty industry standard process. I mean, you can look at it and you can, you could make the cost a higher percent. You could make technical qualifications higher or lower. So there's just some judgments made. Again, when the RFP went out, this was the criteria that we were going to use. And so that totaled, you can't see it at the bottom, total 700 points, and then it's divided up in different ways. And so how did we go about doing the scoring? And so I'm going to show you a table that gives the ranking and the scoring within each of the criteria. And this essentially gives you the snapshot of how we did it. We went through a whole series of steps, which I'll go through in a minute. But ultimately, after we got the proposals, read them, asked questions, wanted to make sure we didn't have any questions about any of the proposals. We did we did interviews, so some of those same questions came up. Other new questions came up. We went out to every company's corporation yard, looked at their operations, a whole series of steps. In the end, it was up to each evaluator to fill out an evaluation form. And so those were done separately. Those forms are sent in to Hannah Francis, who's not here tonight, recycling coordinator of the county. She compiled it. So the table that you'll see is a compilation of the 4 scores. Myself, Kathleen, and Louie, we haven't seen each other's score sheets. We only know what the consolidated score is. So again, when you look at the table, you'll see the aggregate of the 4 evaluators' numbers put together. We did get feedback through the process. Melinda Casilla is here, who provided some financial background. The county counsel's office gave us legal insights. All of the companies, one of the requirements was to look through the contract and note any exceptions, things that they disagreed with or things they wanted to change. And so we had county counsel's office and an outside counsel look at that. So there were a whole series of folks that sort of gave us input ultimately before the scoring. So what were the steps that we went through? Again, this was all prescribed and laid out in the RFP. We got the proposals. We did sort of a compliance check. We looked and made sure checked to see if each company submitted all of the information they were supposed to. In some cases, there were information gaps, and so we followed up with folks. That generated a couple of rounds of technical questions. There were probably, across the 3 companies, a few hundred questions in total. There were some back and forth. We brought that information together. Some of you attended some public presentations last December. We had each of the companies have an opportunity in this room to give a presentation just about their qualifications and their experience. We didn't have anything about cost. We felt it was important. Once cost gets decided, then, that's all folks seem to want to talk about. So we gave everybody the opportunity to say, hey, here's why we think we're qualified. Here's what our experience is. We had 60-minute plus. All of the companies' interviews went past the 60-minute mark because there was a lot of good dialogue. We asked the proposers in terms of facility locations to go to, so we went out and did that. And then in the end, there's a step in this process that it's not done in every RFP process, but we think it was the fairest thing to do is when you go through the process of asking questions, there may be, some cases there may be a mistake. Maybe a wrong number was put in. Maybe somebody rethinks something about their proposal. So we have an opportunity at the end where we say, here's your best and final offer. We gave everybody a chance to give us a final set of cost forms. So all of the financial information and the rate information that we're sharing tonight is in the report. It's all reflective of sort of the last and final proposal that we got from the companies. And that is that. Any questions at all about these steps?
The final
Yes.
numbers, if I can, Chair. Sure. They got the opportunity to give their final numbers before they saw the other numbers, or did they already know what the other numbers were?
They didn't. No one has seen until I don't know 3 weeks ago when this report came out. Nobody had seen each other's numbers, so it was all done on a blind basis. But I said there were a few obvious changes. We had a change in the. I think it was Phil, the driver's rate, I think? There was a CBA wage rate that changed, so we told everybody to change it the same. But there were other numbers that each company decided to change, and they did it all on they only saw their numbers. And so I think in some cases the numbers went up a little bit. In some cases they stayed the same. But it gave everybody that chance. I think if you don't do that, it just sort of leaves an open door, like maybe somebody felt they didn't get a chance to correct something or change something. So,
Any other questions at this point?
okay, I'm not done yet, Mr. Chair, but
Yeah, well,
I
at
can
this
be done,
little
but-
brief stop. Sometimes it's good
Yes.
if one of us has a question to ask it, and then we could move on.
if you do get tired of me, we can just have Louis come up and
So,
we'll let
okay.
him take over.
Keep going. I know
All right.
you have more in your report.
Okay, so you do have this. This is not a pretty table up on the screen. It is in the report. This is the same exact table in the report. And what it does is it shows all of those criteria. The first columns at the top says total points evaluation criteria. So these are the total points. So you take the 4 evaluators, you add up their points in each of these categories, and then they subtotal down to total points. That's in that sort of greenish olive color. The difference between the first set of columns for the 3 companies and the next set is the far right set of columns is the average. So it's just dividing the number by 4 and then convert it into a percentage. So there were a total of 700 points available. So this is how the scoring turned out. we were told by Hannah Francis that put the table together that the 4 evaluators all had the same rank order, but I can't tell you who was higher or lower in any individual category. So this is the consolidated scoring table. You can see the results down on the bottom corner. Green Waste received 91.4% of the points. Recology was pretty close behind at 87.9, and then RJR, you see their score. And so the rest of the presentations, I'm going to try to highlight different factors in the proposals that we felt there were really differences between the 3 companies, or sort of how they lined up on key criteria. But this big picture, this is the scoring. And to state it again, these are the findings of the evaluation committee. We're not giving you a recommendation. This is going to the selection committee of Ray Espinoza, Bilavera, and Michelle LaForge. And they ultimately, sometime after this meeting, are going to make a decision, and Kathleen and I will assist them in writing a staff report, but the recommendation will come from the selection committee. And they have the discretion. They can stay with this ranking. They could decide to recommend somebody that's not ranked 1. It's up to their discretion. We have had 2 meetings, or we had 2 or 3, Kathleen? 2 meetings with the selection committee. Had a fair number of questions from them, answered any questions that we could, and so, again, they'll be meeting sometime after this meeting and then coming forward with a recommendation. So, again, I'm going to get into lots of the detail behind this, but any questions at all about this table? Okay. So, how did Green Waste Recovery come out on top in the findings? Again, this isn't the recommendation, but the findings. What were some of the key differentiators? When we went to that first sort of checklist on the proposals, they were the only company to submit a fully compliant proposal, meaning there was an outline in the RFP and said, here are all the elements you have to submit. They submitted all of the elements. The 3 proposals are actually in front of you. Kathleen and I would be more than happy to hand you one of the binders over if you want to glance through those. So that was number 1. Number 2, and this gets back to what Kathleen was saying, in the end, these programs are being driven, the expansion of the programs are being driven because the programs here are substandard to your neighbors. They're really putting the regional agency in a situation where we have a verbal handshake with the regulatory agency saying, hey, you're making a good faith effort so long as you implement those programs in the new franchise. And so there's a lot of pressure to bring the standard of programs up. What we did in the franchise agreement is we said the minimum diversion requirement that all 3 companies have to reach is 45%. And I'm going to show you a table in a minute that'll give you the projected diversion rates for each of the 3 companies. But the evaluation committee felt that Green Waste, we had the highest level of confidence they were going to get the regional agency to 45% and beyond that number. And we'll give you some of the metrics behind that. Green Waste included 2 additional outreach staff. So Kathleen was talking about staffing and how do we get the business community rates up. That number that you saw on that table where there was one set of communities that was 30-something%, it was more than double the other jurisdictions. That's because they have about 7 or 8 outreach staff and they have a really committed effort. And so the big difference here in this proposal is we required all 3 proposers to have at least 2. And so Green Waste proposed 2 additional staff in the first year. So they have the expense in their proposal.
One sec, Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Kevin, did you ask them FTEs, 40 hours per week, or is just warm bodies will be out there 4 hours? 4 individuals will be out there, because sometimes you get more work with 2 individuals than 4 individuals. So did you ask that question? And did they provide documentation that this is how they're going to use the 4 individuals versus the other 2 providers that are going to provide 2 individuals?
Yes, thanks for the question, Mr. Supervisor. So the companies had to submit very long cost forms where they had to spell out all of their staffing assumptions. So they had labor hours, and then they were converted to FTE equivalents. So we knew if it was a rounded up number or a partial number. We had OT numbers in there for other job classifications besides these positions, but we knew that was for FTEs in the first year. So really the big push in the first year, that's where you get your biggest bang for your buck. That's where you're going to see the biggest jump in numbers, and then it may go up incrementally after that. And so they have 2 additional staff in the first year. Then they drop back down to the level of 2 that the other companies proposed.
And it was accounted in their budget.
Yes, it was in their proposal. Yeah.
For paid.
Yep.
Okay.
The last point on this page is a big point, and it's something the evaluation committee members all felt pretty strongly about. When the companies went through this process, they had to submit detailed spreadsheets on their cost, and then they had to fill out a series of rates. Because in the end, what you all are going to vote on are the rates for your constituents. The costs can be what they are, but in the end, the companies have a rate sheet, and that's what they're going to charge the customers. And so there were big differences in how the companies approach their rates, and I'm going to break this out in a couple of slides. But in the case of green waste, they essentially propose residential rates that cover residential costs, and they propose commercial rates that cover commercial costs. With the other 2 companies, they propose substantially higher commercial rates to subsidize the residential rates. Now, admittedly, that's common practice. Most communities in California, that's how rates are done. The challenge with that is there's some law, Prop 218, and other things that make that troublesome if Prop 218 applied to the rates. But the bigger issue is we've been talking about how we drive up commercial recycling. How do we get businesses to recycle more? And the concern of the evaluation committee is if you build in these substantially embedded subsidies, if you start trying to drive the commercial diversion rates up, you're going to blow a hole in the revenue base for those 2 companies. They're essentially saying, hey, we're going to get a lot more revenue on the commercial side than the residential, but we're saying to them, we want you to divert a lot of the waste out of the commercial, which is going to reduce their revenue stream. And so I'm sure the 2 proposers will speak to that, but I wanted just to explain that when we actually did the scoring. We took into account that Recology had the lowest cost, but when we looked at the rates, we were very concerned about that rate model. And so I have some other slides that will get into that. Mr. Medina, do you have a question?
I think you're going to cover it later on.
Yes, I'm getting to,
The tons, residential versus commercial.
Yes, we have some numbers that we'll show. Some of the other items that we felt were standout is that green waste proposed the lowest commercial organics rate. So again, Kathleen mentioned big push to get food waste out of the waste stream. Green waste provided the lowest rates for that service. Another issue that becomes important when you get into contract negotiations is we had to weigh how many contract exceptions. So again, we provided the draft agreement in the RFP. The companies all redlined it, and so green waste had the fewest number of contract exceptions. So they'll essentially would be the easiest company to negotiate the final deal with. This is just a quick slide on that. This is what I was talking about. We sort of did the checklist. Did folks submit all the requirements in the proposal when they first turned the proposal in? Green waste was 100% compliant. Recology submitted nearly all of the required information, and RGR submitted about 2/3 of it. And this,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I got a question on that 100%.
Yep.
Does Green Waste have a facility in San Benito County?
Green waste does not currently have a facility in San Benito County that I'm aware of. No.
They're not.
They, along with RGR, proposed new corporation yards in their proposals. So right now we don't have a hauling company corporation yard in the county for the franchise. RGR obviously has one for the non-franchise business. So this process, each company had to provide a corporation yard. The companies that proposed a corporation yard actually did receive more points in the process. That was part of the evaluation criteria. So both Green Waste and RGR proposed new corporation yards. And I have a table on that too. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Mr. Medina, you keep looking like you have a question
Yeah,
for
that
me. but-
corporation yard you're speaking of is off of Fallon Road for green waste. Is that correct?
Yes, Fallon near Fairview.
And is that the best place to actually have something, being that there's a lot of crops and a lot of agriculture right behind that area that they're looking at?
I'm going to let Green Waste speak to that. They're going to make a presentation, and they can tell you why they selected that site.
But Mr. Chair, on that notion, Supervisor Medina, to my knowledge, Ferry Road is a real big traffic issue in our community. And to build a corporate yard out there, it's gonna be a hard thing unless they mitigate a lot of traffic conditions. So,
Okay. Well, this was an open process. The companies made their own assumptions about what trucks they're going to put on the road, where they're going to put a corp yard, and those are fair questions I asked them about why they picked that location. Okay. Go through this real quickly. This is really the takeaway for this is that when you look at this process, we have 3 good firms that proposed. All 3 of them are qualified to provide the services. All of them have good qualifications in other communities. RJR here in town brought in 2 partner companies that have a lot of experience with franchises. So all 3 of them, if you look at the very high level, good firms and lots of experience. So what are some of the differences between the 3 firms? Obviously, Recology is the incumbent. They know the service area the best. They have a strong track record. Their management team knows the service area. And I know this from my own personal experience. And from what we've seen here, they're very active in the community and have a very good reputation in the community. Green Waste, they have significant experience managing franchises bigger than this one in adjoining counties. They have a large contract in the Monterey Bay area. They serve a portion of Santa Clara County. They serve Santa Cruz County and plenty of other areas. Some of you have also been on tours of their facilities in San Jose, very significant MRF processing operation just up the road in 25. They have one of the largest compost facilities in the state of California, so very significant infrastructure. RJR, with their partners, Garden City and Atlas, again, good. They brought in very good partners with lots of experience in other areas. RJR obviously works here, and so they have that local knowledge and experience to bring to the table. Jurisdiction satisfaction. So one of the things that we did that's normal in this process is we actually went out. Kathleen did phone interviews for 5 She did phone interviews of 5 references provided for each company, and these are pretty much city manager level, department level people. Overall, all of the companies received good marks. RJR, really Garden City Sanitation, it was their references. Garden City and Recology. If you looked into, there were 8 or 9 questions. As you went into all of the questions, they probably received a little bit higher survey results from those jurisdictions, and that was reflected in the scoring. Labor agreements. This was an issue that came up at the last meeting at the ad hoc committee. There were some questions raised about worker retention policies. What about the drivers, MOUs? The critical thing is there's worker retention language in the RFP. It's in the franchise agreement. So all of the existing workers are going to be retained. And so the worker retention language was shared with the Teamsters before the documents ever went out, and they were asked for any feedback. They didn't make any changes. I tried to include worker retention language that was standard in other franchises, so people were aware of it. So the proposals that were submitted were basically with the acknowledgement of a worker retention policy. All of the existing union wages and benefit rates were used. In the case of Green Waste, they actually signed an MOU in advance with the Teamsters that relates to their commitment to negotiate an agreement with them. RJR can speak to that issue. They had not signed one before they had submitted their proposal. But I think the other critical thing is all 3 firms proposed driver headcount that's above Recology. So that's not saying that one company has fewer or lesser drivers. It's just simply saying there's 15 drivers currently in the service area, and all of the companies propose more than 15 drivers. So based on those proposals, there aren't going to be any reductions in driver headcount.
Have we, just comparing, being that Recology is our current provider, is there major complaints about their pickup or their drivers or anything like that, as you know?
No, there isn't. And in fact, when we went to the ad hoc committee process a year ago, across the board, the feedback was all positive. I mean, that was something that was talked about. The feeling was the customer service and what the drivers do every day was good service.
So their customer service is known, whereas the other 2 applicants at this point in time, we can't say whether we know their customer service or not.
Can you rephrase that question?
Well, I'm looking at customer service. That
Yes.
plays a large role.
Yeah.
And right now, Recology is Danone. We know they have great customer service because we haven't had a lot of complaints with them. Whereas Green Waste and RJR, we can't really speak to that, can we?
Well, I think the evaluation committee can only speak to it in terms of the interviews that we did of other jurisdictions and any experience that any of us had with those companies in other jurisdictions. Those companies, Garden City Sanitation, great reputation with their municipal customers. Green Waste Recovery did very well with their municipal references too. So do we know exactly how they're going to perform in this specific environment? We don't know that. It's like any interview process. You have to try to make a judgment about, okay, how have they performed elsewhere? And in the case of RJR and Green Waste, they both did very well with their reference checks and have good reputations for customer service in other communities.
Mr. Chair, Kevin, on the
Yes, sir.
on the point system, did the committee grade on current status if they have an agreement with the labor union or they have a MAU or such as RJR is not opposed to signing one at a later date? Were points into consideration on those statements?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I bring this up because I know when we went through your two councils and board, this was an issue. And the labor community came to the meetings. I wanted everybody to just know this is the information that we got through the process.
So the summary points, none of these positions were into
No.
consideration, right?
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I referenced this a little bit earlier. This is a table that shows the diversion rates. So the three companies essentially they responded to the RFP, they sort of built their programs, their staffing, and then they forecasted to us, okay, what percent of the waste stream are they going to divert from the landfill? And so this is part of the scoring as it related to diversion ability, diversion plan. And so the minimum was 45%. So you can see all three of them are saying they're going to be above 45%, and then if you look across over the time horizon, Green Waste is looking at a 60% overall diversion by the end of the contract term if it goes out to the 10 years, and RJR is at 54%. It was not a requirement in the RFP for people to project out 10 years, so don't read anything into that thing. The data, the words that say not provided. Recology didn't refuse to provide anything. We just don't have a 10-year diversion number. But their progression is 45% in year one, up to 51% in year four. We asked a lot of questions about these assumptions. You know, how much did you think residential garbage would drop? How much would the organics go up? So there was a lot of questioning around these numbers, and we felt on this particular criteria, in achieving these numbers, the evaluation committee, the four of us felt they scored the highest related to this. Okay. Recycling outreach plan, I'll go through this quickly. This just highlights, again, the staffing assumptions. Green Waste, 2 additional staff in the first year. Then they go to 2 staff the rest of the contract, which is what the contract minimum was. Part of the tricky thing for us as the evaluation committee is we get the proposals and we do have to make judgments on all of the data and information that's given us. And so what we've tried to do in a few places is tell you the level of detail that we got from the 3 companies. In the case of Green Waste, they gave us 26 pages of very good detail on exactly how they would implement the programs, and this was an area where they scored much higher than Recology and RJR. They just simply gave us a much more detailed plan. When we asked questions in the interview, we felt like they had a better, more well-thought-out plan. Corporation yard, so this gets back to Mr. De La Cruz, some of the questions you were asked. So there it is. 2321 Fallon Road, so that's on the right. If you're going on Fallon towards Fairview, it's on the right side, a little bit set back from Fairview. And this is a consideration that we're going to talk about a little bit here. You know, what's the distance from downtown? If you think of this as sort of being the centroid of the waste shed, where the population is, sort of where the routing it goes, this is an important consideration. RJR has their proposed corp yard is the closest to downtown. Green Waste is 4.7 miles out, and then Recology is basing their trucking out of Gilroy. And so this does get into headcount assumptions. There's more efficiency to have a local corporation yard, the drivers get to their route sooner, they get back off their route sooner. So that's some of the information that's included. Recology has a built out existing corp yard facility. They've got everything that they need there, including a CNG fueling facility that's already in place.
Mr. Chair, to this question, did you take into consideration that if they don't have a San Benito County or Hollister residence, like vehicle purchases, any tax related, sales tax related, San Benito County in general will not benefit from it? For example, Recology, they have theirs in Gilroy, and Green Waste, they're not 100% sure they're going to be able to build out there by Fairview Road, and we know that RGR does have their facility locally. So, did the committee take that into consideration in terms of providing points?
No, that wasn't taken into consideration. It was understood that the location of a corporation yard in the county was beneficial, and there were operational benefits or local purchasing benefits. But we just didn't have the data to essentially say, if somebody had a corporation yard in the county, they got more points because we were directed in the criteria. But in terms of trying to figure out actual sales tax revenue, some of it's just the way the math was done and numbers that we were given. And Green Waste broke out their capital expenditures for the corporation yard. We know what the facility improvements are. RJR did not provide some of that in capital cost. They had it in lease cost, and I'm going to be getting some data from RJR to share with Ray Espinoza. So the county staff are going to try to quantify that. They're going to try to quantify sales tax revenue from RJR's purchases and Green Waste purchases. I don't have that data, but that data is going to be provided.
Did
Yes,
you
sir.
take into consideration that all these companies are, and even the JPA will be under a greenhouse gas reduction program, and so closer to the main places will get you there easier than someone coming a distance?
That wasn't a formal criteria. It was sort of understood that that was an advantage of having a local corporation yard.
Okay.
But in this process, with the incumbent company having a facility in Gilroy, we were directed by the three agencies to put extra points in there for a local yard. But it wasn't weighted. We didn't want to set the weighting up so that the incumbent essentially was being penalized for having an existing facility and providing the service. And so we didn't get too deeply into issues like that.
Okay.
I think Supervisor Medina has something.
Well, we know two knowns. RJR is here in Hollister. We also know that Recology is in Gilroy. Now, let's say, for instance, Green Waste, they were to receive the contract. Are they required to have their operation here in Hollister?
We have a binding proposal from them that they're going to have a corporation yard in.
So once again, are they required?
If it's in their proposal, they're going to have a contract they're going to sign, and it's going to be required.
Okay, so it will be required.
If they have difficulties getting that cited or something, the risk and the cost and the exposure is all on them. That would all be negotiated in the contract.
So they once again, they would have to be here.
Yes,
now.
absolutely. Yep. These proposals are binding, and the agreement that goes with it is binding. So, absolutely. Okay. Some additional information in the corp yard. So again, the value, there's environmental value, which we did not assign points to, but there's value, and it relates to the head count, the total number of drivers, and some of the efficiency. So if you have the local corporation yard, again, there's going to be reduced off-route driver time. Both Green Waste and RJR already has a permit to transfer recyclables from that facility, because right now we don't have a local facility to sort the recyclables. It has to go out of county. And so RJR already has a permit and the ability to transfer from their current facility. Green Waste is proposing in their new yard, they'll have the same capability. Why does this sort of mean anything? Recology is proposing when their driver picks up the recyclables on the street, they're going to then drive the truck to Marina and then back. And so there's just a lot more time associated with it. And I only bring this up because there was a lot of mention about head count differences. And some of these differences in driver head count are because we have a local corporation yard, you don't have your drivers going to Marina, with a truck full of recyclables. So there's efficiency gains, and so that's some really the main part of the differences. Not all, but part of the differences. The last bullet is about some of these one-time financial benefits that Ray's got some numbers, and when we get the figures from RJR, we'll calculate those, and then we can share that information.
So only RJR has a transfer station now because, by law, those are only transfer stations are allowed to consolidate loads.
They have a permit to medium volume, what is it, up to 100 tons per day? I'm looking, yes? Yep. So it's sort of the easiest level of transfer station permit. It's not a full garbage transfer station permit, but it's sort of the easiest one you can get. But it's valuable because we don't have the infrastructure in the county to process these recyclables.
But it gives them the ability to consolidate loads, though.
Yes, sir. Okay. So staffing level. So there's some bullets here, and then I have a staffing table. So in terms of drivers, there's a difference in the head count. So Green Waste is proposing 15.55 drivers, RJR 17.88, and then Recology, I'm going to show you a table, their numbers above that. So in all cases, the head count is above the existing driver head count. Again, I just want to make that point because it was brought up at the last meeting. There was some conversation about that. In the overall staffing, Green Waste proposed higher staffing for customer service and, again, the recycling outreach. The other thing with both Green Waste and RJR is their management staff are 100% dedicated to this contract. So if you look at the head count, they're all people for this contract. One of the advantages Recology has, and it lowers their costs, they have existing resources, they have 2 other contracts, and so they can allocate their costs. So from not how many hours a week does Phil spend in the service area, I know Phil spends more than 29% of his time, but on this cost sheet and on the time that they allocated, they only allocate 29% of their management time to this contract.
Mr. Chair, you brought up management, so I was going to wait till the end, but I'll just say it now. You gave Green Waste, what is it? 162.87 average points on companies' qualification and experience, and you gave Recology 163.12, roughly about a 0.3 increase. I imagine because they're basically the incumbent today, and they have the qualifications and experience. I don't know why you gave them such a point differential. In my book, I would have given them more points than just that slight difference compared to Green Waste, because they're all the incumbent and they have the experience. And Phil, with all due respect, Phil, he has X number of years, so I'm trying to equate that.
So the company qualifications so that's company qualifications and experience, and page 32 of the staff report. So the written document in front of you, there's an Appendix B, and this lists the criteria that we use to do the scoring. So there's a section 6.22, company qualifications and experience. If it was simply management, item number 3, management and customer service systems, if it was just sort of existing management, that was the only criteria, I absolutely agree with you. But we had a whole number of criteria that we went through to come up with that score. So it wasn't just simply about who has the most experience in the service area, who has the most experienced manager. We looked at all their other contracts, their past performance record, financial information, the jurisdiction satisfaction results. So there was a whole bunch of criteria that went into that scoring. So. Okay, so let's look at the head count. So here are the differences in the first column, drivers. So Green Waste, there are those numbers. Recology, 22.76. In total, you just go across from left to right. Green Waste had far fewer drivers. RJR had a couple of more. Green Waste, more mechanics, more customer service staff, more outreach staff, and mentioned the management staff. So in terms of full-time, that's what these are, full-time equivalents. RJR has 4 management staff, Green Waste 3, and then Recology 2.32. And again, that's hours that they've allocated to this contract because their management team is, Recology is managing 2 other contracts. Again, mentioned before, the headcount issues on drivers, they are explained in part from just more efficiency. You have a local corp yard, you're going to have less off-route time for the drivers, and then the drivers aren't driving the materials much further away. Yes, Mr. Medina?
I got a weird question, but you know.
No question is weird. How do I go back?
The ecology people in the audience here, are they all from the Hollister district, or are they from different districts?
We're Hollister residents. And a lot of us work here.
Okay.
Well, it didn't sound like an overwhelming.
I was just curious. Because I was just looking at the Manning and the county people, and it was a little bit different.
So this table summarizes where the companies are taking their materials. So the drivers, when they come off their route, where are they driving to? They all take the garbage to the John Smith Road landfill. That's very close in. The recyclables, a very different story. Green Waste would unload the recyclables at their proposed corp yard, and same thing with RJR. They're going to build a new corp yard, but they already have the ability to transfer materials. RJR's residential recycling would be going to Marina in a larger transfer trailer, not in a garbage route truck. So when we said driver headcount, those were these gentlemen here in trucks out on the routes, not drivers in big transfer trailers. And then Recology, I believe it's a couple of truckloads a day. They're going to make the drive to Marina and back. And so that really just burns up a lot of time in terms of the route efficiency and affects the headcount. Transition plan, there's been some conversation about this. Clearly, Recology, as the incumbent, has a much simpler transition plan. They have an existing yard. They don't have to build infrastructure. But I think what gets missed any time that you implement a new franchise agreement, you have new services, you're hiring new staff, you're buying new trucks, carts, and bins, you're developing new public education materials. So all 3 of the companies are going to be doing new things and transitioning. Green Waste and RJR obviously have the heavier lift. They're going to have to build new corporation yards. The critical thing about all this, and something that will be coming to you soon, it's sort of at the end of this agenda packet, is when we look at the meeting today and when you all go through your deliberations, we're not going to be able to get this process sort of done in time to allow any one of the 3 companies sufficient time to get corp yards set up, hire new staff, purchase equipment. So I'll sort of jump ahead to something I was going to mention earlier. Recology has agreed to a short-term extension, so they're drafting a contract amendment. Will be coming to each of your governing bodies for approval of that. That would take the contract out 4 months, and so it would go through October 31st. And so whoever you pick, there should be sufficient time for any of the companies to get through some of the critical startup items.
Just on the implementation plan,
Yes.
I understand that the easiest one is for Recology, but RGR has a footprint here also at this point in time. So their implementation plan would be much easier or much more efficient and effective than the Green Waste. Would that be safe to state, or?
Mr. Supervisor, I don't completely agree with that, and here's why. The implementation plan covers everything from details about there's a lot of sequencing that goes on with the existing customers. If you're going to be switching out carts at homes, switching bins out at residences, you're going to be buying new trucks. If it was simply about just the yard itself, that's true. Again, that's just one element of it, is the yard, but there's all of the other details that go into procuring new equipment, hiring staff, hiring your outreach team, doing public education materials. So it's really the difference between 2 companies essentially gave us an outline. All the points were there. Recology and RGR gave us all if you looked at the task list and a schedule, they hit all the tasks. The difference is one company just gave us a lot more detail explaining that they really understood what all of the steps that we're going to go through. Because obviously in the end, there's going to be a lot of planning with the transition. And so again, the evaluation committee, we're looking at the 3 proposals. We have to evaluate who do we feel the most comfortable with in terms of their plan for implementing this. And The incumbent has a far simpler plan, and so that was acknowledged. But for the other two companies, we gave weight to the fact who had the more detailed, well-thought-out plan for a transition.
But just an 18-page implementation plan versus a 3-page implementation plan, just because people say words, that doesn't always mean action. So that's just when I look at is, just because there is a lot of verbiage in there, what you're saying,
Yeah.
that doesn't always mean that they're the better group or the better.
Well, I would say they weren't just loquacious, so there was something there in the 18 pages. And for any of these items, the evaluation committee would be more than happy to sit down and give you the side-by-side detail. It's in the proposals, but it wasn't just simply one company had a longer plan than another. Oh,
Time's up.
we timed out.
I like that one.
No.
I don't know why anybody would do that. Okay, where do we go? Oh, I got to go back. Okay, sorry. I got thrown off by the power.
Yeah, as we're going through this, one of the things that all of us on this side of the dais understands is that this is just a recommendation from a committee, and then we'll have another crack at it when we make our decisions at a later date on our board meetings. So,
Mr. Chair, with all due respect, I agree with you, but the problem is, being in government for about, 25 plus years, seems like what's developed at the committee level and recommendation of staff is 90% the recommendation and the vote that the elected bodies will make. And so it is better for us to question today, right now, before the ink is dry on the recommendation from staff to the board.
yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this meeting with the full councils and the full board, is because the folks that are on the subcommittee have seen this and asked a lot of our questions already, and we felt it was important that everybody else had the same opportunity. So that's where we're at. So, any other questions?
Okay.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I want to talk about costs, and then I'll finish up talking about rates. So this is going to go through a couple of tables that just point out, again, this is all in your report. There's nothing new on the screen. But in terms of some of the different assumptions for each of the three companies, in the case of Green Waste, they did have the highest total cost, about 5.4% higher than Recology. One of the key recommendations from the evaluation committee, going back to diverting waste out of the landfill, organics being a big part of that, is that our recommendation is that there's an optional organics proposal that should be rolled out at the beginning of the service. In the case of Green Waste, instead they gave us a bundled base proposal with this optional organics program. And so when you look at their numbers, they sort of bundled the base plus the optional, and so that's the difference in their numbers. What's important is when companies complete these RFPs and they submit these cost forms and these rate sheets, they make the assumptions. And so what's interesting as we go through this, these companies made just wildly different assumptions. They're just completely different, and they're their assumptions. And so in the case of Green Waste, they proposed the same residential rates for all three of you. They just said they're just the same numbers for each of the three jurisdictions. They also didn't put a big subsidy in their numbers. They pretty much said residential rates are covering our cost, commercial rates are covering our cost. And that's very different from the other two companies. Green Waste generally had lower residential cart rates, lower than RJR. Recology had the lowest residential rates. On the commercial rates, Green Waste, because they didn't move the commercial rates up to drop the residential rates, they kind of kept them more balanced. They have the lowest overall commercial rates. So it would make it a nice, easy package if it just sort of lined up. One company had the best technical proposal and the lowest rates across the board, but it didn't really shake out that way. If we jump down to Recology, they had the lowest overall cost. But again, what you're going to be approving are rate sheets. And when you look at the rate sheets, what does Recology have? They have the lowest residential rate. So When Recology does their presentation, they're going to mention some figures, some average cost savings per year, and it's absolutely a valid number. They have the lowest residential rates. They also propose the highest commercial rates. And it's largely because they have these huge embedded subsidies. Their commercial rates are 58% above cost, and the residential rates are about 22% below cost. Again, RJR, in their case, their rate approach was they proposed different residential and commercial rates for the three of you. So that was their assumption. They do have the embedded subsidy on the commercial versus residential. They had the lowest commercial solid waste bin rate. So the metal bins are out behind businesses. In total, they had the lowest commercial solid waste bin rates. When you put that together with the rates they're going to charge customers for organic waste, you put those two together, then they end up being the second lowest commercial cost. Green waste has the lowest commercial rates. This is a very difficult to, I think it's cut off too. This is Table O from your report, which, let me make sure it's page 23. There's a table that summarizes the cost. My apologies to the audience, but this is in the written report. This is the same report, the same table as the last report we did 2 weeks ago. So in total, what's remarkable is how close the costs are across the three firms. So they're within about $150,000 of each other, and so they're very, very close. But again, what the companies did is they gave us cost sheets and they gave us rate sheets, and the rate sheets are what are going to come forward for your approval. Whoever you pick, at some point you're going to be picking a company and their rate sheet. So in terms of those rate tables, we have a whole series of them in your report. They show the three companies for each of you, residential and commercial rates. Those are tables P1 through P7. To state again, Recology proposed the lowest residential rates across the three jurisdictions, but the highest overall commercial rates. RJR had the lowest commercial solid waste rates, and in the case of green waste, when you factored in solid waste service plus organics, their number was the lowest. So it's kind of a mixed picture on the rates. This talks about the contract exceptions. I mentioned earlier we had the county counsel's office and outside counsel go through the contract exceptions, and Green Waste took the fewest total number of exceptions, the fewest number of major exceptions than Recology and RJR. So this is when you sit down and try to negotiate a final deal. The Green Waste did receive more points because they just took fewer contract exceptions, and the ones that they took were very minor. And so that's just a reflection of if Green Waste was recommended and selected, it'd be much easier to negotiate a final agreement with them. That does not say that the opposite is not true. It's not to say that a contract can't be negotiated with the other two firms, but in terms of how we did our point scoring system, this is what we based it on for contract exceptions. Okay, in terms of schedule, I already let the cat out of the bag. We're going to be coming forward to you imminently with a request for a short-term contract extension with Recology that would go through October 31st, so that should be sometime in April. Let me back up. In terms of the next steps after today, the selection committee, Bill, Ray, and Michelle, are the ones that are going to be forwarding you a recommendation. And so they're going to rely on the evaluation committee report and questions they've asked of us, and ultimately they're going to put forward a recommendation that'll come to you in April. After that, essentially the schedule is the three of you are going to independently deliberate. All of our assumptions about the contract are premised on picking one contractor. That was sort of discussed a year ago. If there's not consensus, this process gets very complex, and at some point, we really need to try to get to a consensus opinion. If we don't reach that, and you're faced with what you had back before this process and before the current ecology contract of individual contracts, you're going to probably be faced with much higher cost, and so we'll hope for the best as we go through this. Once you hopefully do approve a single contractor, then there'll be a contract negotiated. Each of the three firms, no matter who you pick, each has unique issues. So you may pick one company, and there may be certain concerns you have about a corp yard. You may pick someone else. You may have concerns about, they need to have a better recycling plan. So whatever it is, it'll get negotiated in the final agreement. In terms of the evaluation committee's role, Kathleen and I, as the contract staff for the IWM department, ultimately we're here to support whatever decision that you make. And so this is sort of the finishing of the evaluation committee process, and then we put our IWM hats on. And whatever decision that you make, we'll move forward to support that implementation. And hopefully in the fall, we're going to have some fantastic new programs to roll out in the service area. So with that, I'm going to sit down unless you have any more questions
Okay,
for me.
yeah, I'm a
One quick question,
Sure.
Mr. Chair. I want to make sure I'm understanding. All of the proposals met the 8939 requirement within 4 years. Is that what I saw?
Each of the three companies met the minimum diversion
1%.
requirement in the contract. Yes, all three of them
All
did.
three.
Yeah.
within 4.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the board here?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on the mayor's question. So right now, we're at about 6% recycling. Is that for commercial? Is that?
That's correct.
And we're going to get to 51%. That's a heck of a jump.
That's the blended number.
That's the overall.
That's the overall number.
Okay. Overall number. Okay.
Yeah. Kev, what slide is that?
Okay. Take the commercial sector.
If you go,
Let's see, what does it say? Diversion rate is 28%. Okay. With the residential.
if you look at this slide here, below the red numbers, it gives you the commercial diversion rate. It doesn't actually show the residential, but in the case of green waste, they're relying more heavily on a big bump in commercial to get the overall number. In the case of Recology, they're looking for a much bigger residential bump to sort of get there. So they just made different assumptions. But we wanted to show you what other communities are doing with commercial recycling, because the reality in all these other local communities is it's an open market system. There are other recyclers like RJR picking up recyclables in those same service areas. And so when we show you a percentage of 6%, 7%, whatever it is, that's only what the franchise hauler is picking up. There are other companies that are diverting waste. That does count towards diversion credit. But those same situations exist in those other communities. So
Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, so it's safe to say that there's a lot of opportunity here to really bump those numbers up.
yes, sir.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Supervisor De La Cruz?
Yes, Kevin,
Yes, sir.
you didn't take in consideration the overall percentage, like, for example, for green waste, 53.5, et cetera, and the point allocation, correct?
We did as part of one of the criteria. So when we had a broad criteria that was about companies' technical proposal. So it was their public education plan, their diversion plan, their corporation yard, all these different details. This was one of the criteria. And so in this case, the four evaluators independently looked at these numbers and decided how they were going to award those points.
And the reason why I asked that question is because I noticed that green waste, they put their corporate activities not as an option, but actually in their baseline proposal.
Yeah.
And the other two did not put that. They used it more as an option. So I wonder if you would have taken that out of the equation, what would their percentages and numbers be?
So in the case of the three, that's a very good question. So in the case of the three companies, if you looked at the base proposal and then there was this organics collection, In the case of RJR, they essentially, they put very little additional diversion from the optional program. So they had, and you'll see their commercial numbers higher than Recology's. And so, when you put those two together, it added, in the case of RGR, very little expense and very, very minimal diversion. In the case of Recology, they clearly had a separation. So if you put the cost in for that program, their numbers are going to be higher, but they're not going to be as high as green waste. So if we did the math, I don't have the math here, but if you added in the incremental tons from those organics programs, it doesn't get you to those percentages.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. With that, with the consensus of this board, I felt that we should go ahead and allow the three companies some extra time to make a presentation, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, something like that. I think that might be enough time. And then if you want, we could have a little break before we take public comment to wrap things up. Is that okay with everyone? That's all right?
Need a break?
I don't want to break. Jaime wants to break. But with that, we'll go in an order. I think that was reflective of the selection committee's rank. And so I'll ask Green Waste if you would like to make a statement to the board and not try to throw the other two companies under the bus, so to speak, or garbage truck in this case. Yeah, 6 minutes.
Just out of fairness, the three I see the time, so the three companies were told they would have up to 10 minutes. So two of them have PowerPoint presentations, and they'll just go quickly.
Oh, okay. All right. Then that changes everything.
I'm a fast talker, so let's see if we can get this done. Let me open up my presentation here.
You're just cutting into the break time, that's all.
Right. Okay. And I'm a Mac girl, so give me 1 second. Here we go. Excellent. So thank you for having us here tonight. My name is Emily Finn. I'm the Director of Business Development and Communications for Green Waste Recovery. Some of you I've met here from the dais, and some, of course, have been to our facility. So thank you guys for taking the time thus far in this process. It's not an easy process. Staff and your consultants have spent many, many, many hours, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here. So I'll be as quick as I can. Green Waste has two sister companies. We are locally based in San Jose. We have Zanker Road Resource Management that also owns and operates Z-Best Composting Facility, which is just a stone's throw from here. And we also own and operate Zero Waste Energy Development Company, the first and the world's largest organics to energy facility in the entire world. So we're definitely innovators, pioneers in this field, and hope to be able to bring a lot of that technology here. We've been around and doing business for more than 30 years. The president of our company, who's just recently retired, was born in Hollister. Family-owned, locally operated. The co-CEO, who's one of the owners of the company, is here in the audience. We are transparent. We like to be accountable. We really are very open in what we do and how we do it. We don't have a strong bureaucratic or corporate structure that makes things more difficult for us to make real-time decisions. So when there's a request, even if it's outside of a franchise agreement that we have, it's really our company culture to be able to accommodate the requests to the jurisdictions that we serve. And I'm going to try to integrate answers to some of the questions. Supervisor Medina asked a question about the transitions, and we have serviced in the last 10 years, we have done 16 different transitions into jurisdictions. And as Kevin mentioned, we have a very good reputation in terms of the reference checks that were done, and a lot of those were of the jurisdictions that we've transitioned into. We integrate our collection and our processing operations, so we're not reliant on other recyclers to deal with our materials. We own and operate our recovery facility, so the things that we say you can put in the recyclables bin, we are the ones that are responsible for marketing those materials and making sure that those materials get recycled. We also have excellent customer satisfaction, both from the customer service side of things when you call in, as well as the drivers that we most often, and it's just good business to take on and invite the drivers for the area that we're taking over service. We want those drivers to be our drivers. They're the ones that know your residents. They're the ones that know your businesses. We have a very strong focus, and this is to Councilmember Freeman, we have a very strong focus on greenhouse gas emissions, reductions, transparency. We are climate registered, so we actually have a third-party certification process. We have a sustainability report so that we have transparency in the public eye. We are green business certified in our facilities, both our operations yards, corporate facilities, et cetera, and also have commendation from an environmental organization, Baykeeper, that has historically been litigious against waste management type companies, and we have commendation from them as leaders in this industry for protecting stormwater. We've incorporated different biofuels, CNG fuels in all of our operations, so we're really trying to reduce the carbon footprint. We do backhauling, so we never want a truck to go anywhere empty. We want to bring those materials and move all of our materials from a logistically efficient standpoint. We also, as I mentioned, own and operate a composting facility as well as an anaerobic digestion facility, so that's offsetting our carbon footprint as well. And our family of companies collectively, third-party certified, we are 28 times carbon negative. So not only do we not impose a carbon footprint, we're 28 times carbon negative. And then also operate solar panels on our facilities whenever we can as well. Let's see, there we go. From a collection contractor standpoint, we have more than 230,000 residential customers, 230 collection vehicles, 300 plus thousand residential customers, more than 6,000 commercial customers, and we also have a street sweeping operation that's more than 35,000 curb miles annually. Everything that we do when we're in the field, we prioritize the service that we're giving to the customer. We make sure that after a container is serviced, it's upright, it's in the location that we picked it up from, the lid is closed, there's no litter around. We really prioritize that, and we rely on our drivers, just as Recology relies on the drivers that are servicing your area right now, to be able to provide that exceptional service. Our material recovery facility in San Jose is state-of-the-art. Our most recent processing line opened in December of 2015. Of all the recyclables we receive at that facility, 95 to 98% of them we have an end market for. So we're not saying it's accepted in the recyclables and then landfilling it. We're actually taking all of those materials in the blue bin and actually marketing and doing something good with them. I'm not going to go through the logistics here, but this is just the efficiencies of our operation, the hours, et cetera. Here's just a snapshot. You don't have to pay attention to the details. This is a list of recyclable materials that are accepted, and not just accepted, but we actually have markets to be able to move these materials. So rather than just a list that says put your paper, put your metal, or put your plastics, if you have a question, what do I do with this computer mouse, we tell you where to put it, and it's recyclable. Zbest composting facility just a little north of here, as Kevin mentioned, it's actually the second largest composting operation in Northern California, one of the largest in the state of California, and RJR would also be using this facility as well. This is our sister company. We have premium, really competitive pricing because it's our sister company. And that's where all of the organic materials would go as well. We have both a clean green yard trimmings program and produce a certified organic product for agricultural applications predominantly. And we also compost garbage and food waste at that facility, and that's predominantly landscape markets. So all the material we receive there, the compost goes out, we actually use it, all of it's recovered. As Kevin mentioned as well, our base proposal includes expanded services that were beyond the minimum requirements. And the reason that we incorporated those facets is the way to get to 45+% in year one, you have to have a universal organics program. We have to expand the list of recyclable materials that are accepted, and we have to have a robust technical assistance, education, and outreach program. So we've incorporated all of those into our base proposal. We have an existing MOU with Teamsters, and we have agreed to abide by all the terms and conditions of the existing agreement. Again, as Kevin mentioned, it's a lot of change for the drivers here, and it's our hope, and I know you guys have heard me say this before, we just want the logo on your shirts to change. It's good business practice for us to have the drivers to come to work for us. They're the ones who know and provide the services. As Supervisor Medina mentioned, that they're the ones that are providing the good service that you guys are used to. So we want to come in as the company and transition into service, but we want to rely on the people that have been providing you with such superb service over the years. We also would be hiring 8 new positions, from a route supervisor, our general manager, customer service, as well as the outreach staff. And those are all, by the way, dedicated 100% to the regional agency. I've mentioned our commitment to environmental sustainability, our existing facilities, both our facility in San Jose where we process the recyclable materials, as well as eBest composting where all the organic material would go, and of course the MSW or the garbage would go to the John Smith landfill. And we want to be local, local, local. This was also a question that came up earlier. How do we know that the company is actually going to follow through on what they said? We are in contract to purchase a piece of property at the intersection of Fallon Road and Fairview. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next 2 slides, but we don't want to just have a local presence. We want all of our operations to be based here. We want this to be our home base for this operation that supports our 100% FTEs that are dedicated to this area, as well as a local purchase policy, as well as receiving all of our trucks and our carts and our bins at the facility here so that you guys get the sales tax revenue. And I am committed, and I confirmed with our co-CEO while the presentation was happening, we are guaranteeing that that revenue will come to the area here within San Benito County. And in part because that facility is already developed, we are just retrofitting that facility. It's not a bare piece of ground. The property that we're in contract to purchase is at 2321 Fallon Road, and it's an existing site. It's perfectly zoned for our purposes, both for a corporation yard, to have our administrative offices, as well as to permit a medium volume transfer facility. That is a registration permit. It is not a comprehensive permit like a normal solid waste facilities permit. It's essentially you submit the paperwork, and as long as you fall within the parameters, you are issued a permit. So we've gone through this process on other facilities. We're not worried about being able to get this site permitted. Again, it's the perfect zoning. And I know that there's been concerns about the traffic impacts, and I just wanted to give you guys some proximity issues here. Obviously, we have the Hollister Airport in the bottom left-hand portion. RJR's proposed yard is just a little bit south of there. The connection between the two, of course, is Fallon Road, and then going north-south is Fairview. And for that area on Fairview, the only reason that we would need to go into that intersection is to service the county pocket that's around that area. And I don't have obviously a close-up of it. So you can see it's a little triangle piece of property. So the only access, the ingress and the egress, is actually on Fallon Road. We would not be allowed, nor would we be proposing, to have trucks enter or exit that property on Fairview. So our trucks would be going down Fallon Road, as well as other trucks. Really the only impact would be to the intersection there by Hollister. We already talked about the diversion aspects and our ability to meet that diversion commitment. So I'm not going to go through all of that, but I am going to say that Kevin and his group in the last public meeting that we had really focused on how are these companies going to be able to get to this 45%. And I assure you that they've done their due diligence. We had to submit pages after pages after pages of how are we actually going to accomplish this and where have we had those successes in other areas. I do have some answers to questions that were asked, if you guys want me to answer those.
What I was do was give the opportunity to ask some questions from this body. Okay. And is there any questions specifically for green waste? No? Anyone? With that, you'll probably have some questions when you go before the 3
Perfect.
Jurisdictions, and thank you very much for a very good proposal and all the work that you've done.
Thank you guys for listening.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to invite Recology.
Can you get that? I don't want to mess it up. I hit the wrong button and we'll be here forever.
Yeah. I don't know, Republic will show up or something. There you go.
Okay, we're allied.
And you'll have 10 minutes as well, and then we'll have the opportunity to ask you a question if there is one. Thank you.
Board of Supervisors, members of the City Councils, my name is Phil Couchet. I'm the General Manager of Recology San Benito County. When we started this process over a year ago, there was discussion as to whether to go out to a sole source negotiation with Recology or go out to an RFP process. Ultimately, the decision was to go out for an RFP process. In those discussions at that time, there was a consensus from the jurisdictions that you are happy with the service that we provide. It's been said and mentioned that you don't get complaints regarding our service. The goal of the RFP process was to make sure you got the best deal at the best price. So the process began. When we read through the consultant's recommendation, we were quite surprised. Again, the purpose of the RFP process was to make sure you got a fair deal at a fair price. And Recology created a proposal that was very cost conscious. The results? Recology provided the lowest cost proposal of all three proposers. In our base proposal, on average, your residents are going to save $100 annually, or over $1.5 million per year. We provided this proposal while maintaining high service standards and equitable wages and benefits to our employees, many of them who live in your jurisdictions. We also provided two alternative proposals using existing carts and bins. This provides a savings of almost $2 million. Here is a comparison of the rates for your single-family homes. As you can see, across the board, Recology has the lowest per month rate. These are real savings to your residents. Additionally, I want to point out that our rates also reflect the efficiencies created by the density of homes in the city of Hollister. Take a look at the blue box. In that, it shows that over the course of the contract, your residents are going to save up to $13.6 million. The rates in an alternative proposal are even lower, though these alternatives weren't never presented to you. These proposals are also, as I said before, using existing carts and containers. Take a look at the green box. Recology's proposal over the length of the term of the contract is going to save your residents over $16 million. Again, we heard the reason for the RFP process was to make sure you're getting the fairest deal at the best price. Despite the lower costs, you will not see a sacrifice in services or diversion. Recology maintains a high service standards, and we will provide the smoothest transitions into the new services in the new agreement. How can we do this? We have a built-in infrastructure. We have carts and bins in place. We have a service yard already in place, and we have an existing state-of-the-art CNG facility already built. We do not have to locate, build, permit new facilities or CNG stations. As the staff indicated, our implementation plan was shorter, and this is one of the reasons why. All of this helps keep the rates lower. Recology is well experienced in helping communities meet their diversion goals, and we have a strategy in place to meet those requirements set forth in the contract. Recology is knowledgeable about the service area that we serve, even the more challenging areas. This will allow an uninterrupted service while transitioning to the new services in the new agreement. Recology is part of the community. We are partnering with Pat's Place and the Community Food Bank to help the community thrive. Pictured here is our 19-acre facility off of Highway 152. We have recently invested $2 million to build a state-of-the-art CNG fueling station, which is fully capable of fueling all the vehicles required in this new contract. And a point of interest, a large portion of that $2 million that was spent on this facility was spent for a local contractor right here in Hollister. The report talks about diversion and the current low commercial recycling diversion. What you have to know is what the report doesn't say, and that's we are not the only recycling company in town. RJR currently serves many of the recycling accounts, and most likely the larger accounts. We serve everyone else. The new franchise agreements has performance standards built into it relating to diversion. Recology has outlined a plan to meet those requirements, such as meeting with every multifamily and commercial customer on an annual basis to do waste audits. This will better help Recology understand the needs of the customers and follow their progress throughout the length of the contract. We also have, in our proposal, included as an alternative the rollout of the Universal Organics Program, should the jurisdictions decide to implement it at the beginning. As part of the new agreement, we have two full-time waste service specialists dedicated to your jurisdictions. We have additional array of public outreach materials, displays at public events, and as I mentioned, waste audits to help customers increase their diversion and save them money. And again, these requirements are all clearly spelled out in the new franchise agreement. Recology has been servicing the area for over 10 years. We know what it takes to service the community. The proposed hauler has 7 equivalent less drivers in Recology. That's a 30% reduction in headcount. Even with that 30% reduction in headcount, our overall costs are still lower. We've proposed working with Pat's Place to divert the reusable goods from our bulky item collection and assist the garden at the community food bank. We'll continue providing education and outreach to the schools, including poster contests, doing assemblies, and continuing with the always popular Banana Slug String Band, as seen here performing at the Gavilan Hills Elementary School. Pictured here are examples of Recology's involvement in the community. The upper left is a group of youth doing a neighborhood cleanup, where Recology provided free dumpster service for the debris that they collected. We do this time and time and time again. On the right is a truck you may recognize. It's a firm called Coastal Habitat Education and Environmental Restoration, a mouthful. More commonly known as CHEER. This organization works throughout the county cleaning streams and riverbeds, collects their debris, and takes all that debris back to the our San Martin transfer station at no cost. And below is the flood devastation in the Lovers Lane area last winter. In conjunction with Supervisor Medina, Recology placed debris boxes for those homeowners at a cost of value nearly $15,000 at no cost to the resident or the county. Lastly, I'd like to bring to your attention the survey done to the jurisdictions we serve. We clearly scored the highest of all the bidders. 2 very important categories: customer service, where Recology scored a high of 80%. Again, in community partnering, which Recology scored a high of 100%. In closing, in spite of the consultant's report, which attempts to counter many of the points we made at the ad hoc committee, at the end of the day, the agency's process proved that the incumbent Recology is the best fit for the community. Recology was found to be the lowest priced proposer with the highest levels of customer service and a commitment to diversion. Recology is a proven community partner, and we have over 20 employees who live in the community, many of them who are here tonight.
Okay, Phil.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much
Thank you.
for a good presentation. Any questions from the board here?
I do have a real quick question.
Uh-huh.
Your C&G stations, how does that work, and what kind of taxes are you paying for that fuel? And is those
The fuel itself, we buy from PG&E.
right? But is there a surtax onto that, or how does that work? I'm not familiar on
There are taxes that PG&E charges us.
PG&E charges, so it's not like if it was moved somewhere else, there'd be more revenue coming into San Benito County from any additional tax to the gas from PG&E.
I'm not aware of any other additional charges, taxes on that fuel. There's two components of it. There's the fuel tax and there's electricity bill.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you, Phil.
All right, thank you.
RJR?
Sorry. Turn me off a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. You just wanted it off, right?
No PowerPoint for us. Good evening. Thank you all. Board of Supervisors, City of San Juan, City of Hollister, thank you very much for being here. My name is Robert Rodriguez, and I am actually the junior. Most of you know my dad from being a planning commissioner out here and being involved for a long time. Born and raised in Hollister. Been here my whole life. My wife is from Hollister as well. She was born and raised in here as well. My kids are here. Our whole family's here. We're not going anywhere. As you know, our transfer station, which is here in Hollister as well, which is already fully permitted and no violations, and we accept a lot of material. We're 7 days a week operation. Our franchise, or our non-exclusive franchise that we do is exceptional service. We do a great job. We're 7 days on that as well. One thing that brought me to this was I saw a need that needed to be done, and I saw a lot of revenue that could be put towards San Benito County, and I knew I couldn't do that by myself. So as I did, I interviewed several partners, and I actually partnered up with a couple, two different groups, Garden City Group, which is Mr. Pellegrini, and Atlas Disposal, which is Nick Sickage. And what I really liked about them was the fact that they do a lot for their communities. They're very involved. There's no corporate structure with us. I'm going to be the acting general manager. I'm also one of the partners along with my father and everyone else. But when you all talk to somebody, you're talking to me and the partner, which I am a partner, and there's going to be a decision. It's not going to be a phone call, having to call my boss and trying to get hold of my boss, or as well as I'm here for the whole term. I'm not leaving. I'm not retiring. Whatever it be, I'm not moving somewhere else. I'm not getting promoted to a different position. It is here. You all know where to find me. I live right down the street. My yard's right down the street. We eat here. And so, I really very involved with the local community. Since 2010, I have contributed to over 30 organizations within this community. And as well as, I just pulled my number for 2017, I dealt with 53 vendors of San Benito County and spent over close to $1 million with those vendors. That does not include other companies we have in this community as well. As far as for the drivers, no, we did not sign an MOU. We just did, not that we're opposed to it. We felt that we like to leave the drivers. It's the driver's choice. We want to retain all these drivers, and it's their choice if they want to be union or non-union, but they're going to be getting their current, benefits and rates as it said on the RFP. What I really enjoy about having a corporate yard, especially a lot of drivers that live here in Hollister, they're able to, don't have to drive down Highway 25, don't have to drive down wherever they need to go, out of town. They can drive here if they want to go see their kids' performance or honor roll. They can call me up and, hey, do you mind? Hey, boss, can I go here? No problem. It's close enough to where they can bring the truck back to our yard, hop in their vehicle, and take their break and go see their children or whatever need needs to be. Sorry, I lost my train of thought here. Just the tax benefits alone of having a local yard, we're already established. We're permitted. We don't have to go through a county permit. We have our permits. The addresses on the trucks all say Hollister. Everything will say Hollister. The carts get delivered here. They're not getting delivered to my partner's places. They're getting delivered to Hollister. This is what this is here. Everything is here. I would like to introduce you to Louis Pellegrini, who is also he's owned property here in San Benito County for the past 25 years, and I'm going to pass them on to you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And San Benito is my second home. I have property on Old Hernandez Road in South County for the last 25 years. I'm one of the principals of Garden City Sanitation. We're based out of San Jose. I'm third-generation garbage man. I got 45 years under my belt. I've participated in a lot of RFP processes, and everyone's a little unique. There's a handful of consultants in the Northern California that always try and twist it up and create a process so that the electeds can make a decision. I feel for you sometimes having to go through this process and this decision. Hundreds of pages in documents, 41 pages of this report. It basically comes down, we're all comparable. We know how to do our business. We've been doing it for years. Any way you cut this, when you look at the satisfaction of our other customers, we all rank the same. We all want to take care of the displaced workers because that's really makes the difference. Those drivers in front of every house every day is what makes the difference on the company. Page 23 in the staff document here speaks to the revenue projection for the companies. Multiple bidding processes, it's $150,000 difference, 2% between the three proposers. That is the best number I've ever seen. I think we all did our homework. Sometimes you see a discrepancy of millions of dollars in these deals. So everybody's right on the money on cost. That should be a comfort level. There's nobody lowballing it. In the old days, you throw out the high bid, throw out the low bid, and take the guy in the middle. Well, that would mean us, but it doesn't quite work that way. So we're equal there. The local aspect, the ability that what Robert's family brings is a local yard, permitted facility. There's really no questions of that. I know you went forward with an RFP process that kind of set the rules or what you were going to be looking at. The last 3 or 4 RFP processes I've been in end up going sideways. I don't know if anybody watched what happened in Milpitas, what happened in Windsor. Everything was off the table at the end because it was a mad scramble, threatened lawsuits, timing issues. So in reality, it's my perception that the elected officials have the final say on the way they would like to pursue this. It's my understanding there's going to be a recommendation of one company. Why not get down to a couple companies with the final negotiations, because things could go sideways. If a facility doesn't get permitted, what's your fallback? Referencing Windsor, it got down to a 40-day startup. The process started a year in advance, didn't get let, and there was 40 days till transition. And that previous hauler would not extend. You have the fantastic option here with Recology wanting to extend. We were the successful bidder in that. We weren't ranked the highest, like here, and we weren't the cheapest. We ended up with that contract, and we pulled it off in 40 days. We also, last December, rolled out Milpitas. Prolonged process. We rolled out 50,000 new carts in 5 days in that city. Once again, we were not ranked the highest, and we were not the cheapest. So we are probably the smaller entity of what's been proposed here today, but we are a can-do company, and we get it done. And we are a local based company. The issue of this RFP asked us to set the rates. Everybody took a different approach to that. The cities that I'm dealing with now and the last two RFPs in the negotiation, it was the elected officials and the specific jurisdiction how they want to address the issue between residential rates and commercial rates. In theory, it's your decision how you want to balance that out. From our perspective, as long as it makes the total revenue anticipated, we're happy. There's been a lot of talk tonight about diversion and recycling, the state law. The waste industry and the recycling movement is in a state of crisis today. I'm not everybody here is aware of the Chinese green sword. The radio today, stock market went down 700 points because of a trade war with China. There is recycling material that will not be sold. There will not be a final market for it. And everybody's diversion rate in the state of California, the United States, and the world is going into the toilet because of this trade issue and the green sword in China. There's legislation going right now introduced in the California legislature to give relief because of the situation that's going on with China. In theory, 31% of the recycling stream, China has closed the door on, and markets are disappeared. So I didn't want to end with that note, but there's a lot of things happening today that wasn't discussed here. And in final negotiations, the perception that everything's recyclable isn't the case anymore. So I thank you for the time.
Yeah, thank you very much, and for a fine presentation. Now, with any questions for RJR? No? Thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez. With that, I kind of want to go and just run through the public comment right now, if that's all right. Mr. Mayor?
I'm all right with that.
You're all right with that? Okay. So I do want to be very strict about the 3 minutes, though. So 3 minutes you have to address this combined board. And after that, please be courteous to the next speaker. So with that, do I have any speaker cards?
I don't have any that anybody's turned in.
Okay. Well, would anybody would like to speak to the board? Oh, okay. You could bring your card up. Yes.
Mayor and Councilman, City of San Juan, Council. Well, I guess my time's over. But
no, we're just. That's just to get you nervous.
Okay, sorry.
Poor guy.
So, my name is.
Take the hit.
Okay, I'll take the hit.
There it goes.
There you go.
56.
Keep on.
I think that's 12 minutes, 13. There it is. That's 1 minute.
Oh, 3 minutes. Sorry. I did that on purpose. Sorry.
Okay. All right.
Okay. My name is Herman Arriaga. I'm a Hollister resident. I actually work for Recology for going on 6 years. One of the things I could speak, I'm going to speak very little about the company. I'm an employee owner, meaning every year, it's not just one specific person benefiting from a company. It's all of us in here. The other thing I'd like to add is, yesterday I came home from work after a long day, and then my daughter approaches me. Hey, today they spoke to us about recycling. And she starts telling me, oh yeah, this is, see daddy, see that water bottle? That goes here, that paper goes there. And at the end of the conversation, she's like, oh, so do you remember the lady's name? And she's all like, Jackie, Julie. I was like, Julie? I happen to work with Julie. And where's she at? There she is. So without even knowing, my daughter's already getting our own company, going to R.O. Harding specifically, and getting a presentation done on recycling. Which, I mean, we do have the staff, we do have, it's being exchange between other cities, but the kids are getting the education they need currently. Because she was able to come home and, I mean, besides the whole fact that her father actually works there, but she was able to sort out different items I gave to her, which, not all kids get that in like kindergarten to first grade, or they start to, I'm sorry. But ultimately, like, we do pay the taxes here. I am a homeowner, and Recology has been able to actually give me that. Prior to that, I was renting out in San Juan Bautista, which I was paying and contributing to the committee then too. So that is all I have for you. It's actually less than 3 minutes, even though I got beeped a few times, but thank you.
Thank you very much for stepping up.
Am I ready to go?
Well, go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Isaac Beltran. I work for Recology, going on 5 years this year. I've been a long-time resident here. My family has been a long-time resident here. I've coached Little League here. I've done recreation, sports is recreation. We spend our money here. Recology gave us the job Hollister didn't have, back then. So I thank Recology. All I want to say too is that they make a big deal about trying to be local, and I know it's a big part, but we're not too far away from the county line, and that's where we all start. We start picking up the first can from the county line, and that is probably about less than a quarter mile away from our facility. We start from out there, work our way in. And it's false what everybody else was saying about being here. We get here in a timely manner because we're always here on time. And we get the job done. And we do it as best as we can. That's all I want to say, and hopefully you guys have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for saying. Anybody else?
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Mark Paxton. I'm a resident of Hollister, and in the interest of full disclosure, I also work at the food bank. There's something about numbers, isn't there? Numbers kind of lend gravitas to a discussion, and it sort of frames it. So there's a scoring rubric that the selection team used, and numbers emerged from it. I'm here to ask you to consider that the very scoring rubric may be flawed. When the incumbent contractor enjoys very high customer satisfaction, is a residential rate leader, and partners so effectively with its community, and then scores second, I would question the validity of the model itself. Secondly, a lot of weight seems to be attached to the length of one of the proposers' proposals. And about 3 or 4 centuries ago, when I started in the newspaper business, I had an editor who was fond of saying, any jackass can write long, but it takes real talent to write short. There's something to be said for conciseness. Finally, I'm sure you've asked this question, but for my benefit and for the benefit of other citizens who are here tonight, I'm really curious about the backgrounds of the selection committee members, and specifically if they've enjoyed any past employment or other fiduciary connections with any of the proposers, and if so, which ones? Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Lowe.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Pat Lowe, and I'm a ratepayer. Recology has been operating in San Benito County for 15 years. You don't need this report to rely on Recology and what they offer to the citizens of San Benito County. And their reputation is excellent. And if you ask the nonprofit community, you will receive glowing reports about a company that prides itself on being part of our community and helping whenever possible. When you examine this report, you will find Recology is the lowest bidder. Recology's average percentage pointed is 3.5 less than Green Waste. This is based on a subjective scale. The two most important issues for the ratepayer is service and cost. There is no doubt about Recology, and if they can provide the service, they're doing that today. As for cost, Recology is the lowest bidder. I do have some concerns about Green Waste and their having 7 less drivers. I also believe the fact that Recology is an employee-owned business speaks volumes for the service that will be given by all employees. I would hope you will decide the best fit for San Benito County and the cities of San Juan Bautista and Hollister is Recology. Also, I will hope you will enter into negotiations remembering that with the last contract, we did not want to eliminate the local. RJR was allowed to pick up some of the recycling, and hopefully we can keep moving forward in that direction. There can be some cost saving also for not having to give out new cans, recycling, and garbage. And just please don't change what's working for a 3.5 percentage difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? With that,
no one else, Mr. Chairman, I would like to speak.
Sure. I'm going to close the public comment period and consider Mr. Valdez a staff person.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board and members of the City Council. I was a member of the evaluation committee along with Kathleen Gallagher and Kevin and Patrick. And I can tell you firsthand that no process is perfect, but we took up our tasks with great passion and with great reverence to make the best possible effort to bring the best possible result in the evaluation that we made of the 3 companies. And I think Mr. Pellegrini hit it on the head. They're all very close. They're all excellent professionals in their fields. They all have. I particularly liked Mr. Pellegrini's garbage can. Oh, that was fantastic. That was fantastic. I really like the innovation that shows, and it shows that they all put their heart and soul into that effort, and so did we. All of us on the committee, with the exception of Patrick, work for San Benito County. We do not have any ties to any of the consultants. And to the point that Supervisor Medina made, the reason that we took so much time and that we went through the process that we did and that you have a result like the one you have with so many pages is not because we wanted to be brief and concise for the sake of anybody reading the report. We wanted to be sure that on behalf of you, the elected officials, that we would thoughtfully and carefully and very deliberately take every possible step to mitigate any risk and to come up with the best possible result for the taxpayers of this county. And I think we did that. And I cannot tell you the number of times that we debated back and forth, should we do this, should we do that? What will the boards think if we do this, and what will the boards think if we do that? I think this process is reflective of what government is. Government is process. Government takes time. Government is something that is imperfect. But I think in this particular result, our best considered effort went forth, and that's what the results show. At the end of the day, however, it is your decision. It's your call to make. So I just wanted to reassure everyone in this room that we took our duties very seriously, and we did the best possible job in as objective a manner as we could.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Supervisor Medina?
I do have to ask that question that Mr. Paxton brought up. Has any of the people worked for any of the other competitors?
Do you want to speak to that? I'll let Kevin speak to that, Mr. Medina.
The short answer is no. Kathleen and I had different times worked for Waste Management, Inc., the largest publicly traded company in the industry. They were not one of the proposers. In my previous history, I've negotiated contracts with many of the companies, but none of us, myself, Kathleen, Patrick Matthews, he's the CAO of a public agency, the Salinas Valley Solid Waste Authority. Before that, he was with Santa Cruz County. So I don't know before his public sector experience if he worked in the private sector, but I know it wasn't for any of the proposers.
With that, I don't know if the CAO or the city managers have anything to add or at this point in time. No? All right. I think we have our marching orders as far as taking this information back to our board, deliberating, and trying to reach a decision on who will be awarded these contracts. With that, I want to thank everybody in the public for attending. There's some cookies and brownies up here. I think there's been a few big guys in the back that probably worked a hard day. Feel free to help yourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you.